A good-natured HR manager balances wedding preparations and bridging tense relations between his fiancée, his sister, and his best friend during a vacation. When he gets infected by a zombie virus via mosquito bite, a constant hunger for brains adds to his worries. Two hunters, Penny and Max, survey a trailer park for hostile elements. Penny uses what looks like a crystal ball to detect zombies, which Max promptly shoots in the face with a shotgun. The two briefly squabble about Max's remorseless brutality when another zombie suddenly tackles the older man to the ground. Max knocks the zombie off, but a mosquito manages to feed on its blood before he kills the monster with a fancy shot. Penny gets multiple readings on her orb, and a horde soon emerges from the woods, attracted to Max's calls. As he fires a pair of submachine guns on the zombies, the infected mosquito buzzes through the woods and splatters onto a car windshield. Inside the car are engaged couple Steve and Tina, accompanied by Steve's sister Sarah and her husband Craig. Tina fusses about wedding details to a clueless Steve, who reminds her fiancé to relax and have fun on their weekend away. Tina whines about his HR management job keeping him busy, as she only wants the event to be special for both of them. Tina comments on Sarah snoring and makes a point of clarifying the latter's role as matron of honor, given that she's married and older. Steve appreciates the gesture nevertheless, and Tina brings out her rabbit muffins for them to fawn over, except for an irritable Sarah. Steve, ignoring Tina and Sarah's thinly concealed animosity, expresses excitement at their family vacation. The group arrives at the cottage, which Tina immediately thinks is in need of an urgent cleanup and summons Sarah for the task. Steve and Craig comment on the women's mutual hostility while unloading luggage from the car. Steve plans to use corporate team-building methods to smooth things over with Tina and Sarah, but Craig notes the futility of the endeavor. As the two walk to the cottage, the mosquito stirs from its blood puddle on the windshield. The frenzied insect flies around and soon makes its way to the cottage door, intent on getting to the humans. Inside, Sarah and Steve lag behind Craig's craftsmanship with the wedding souvenirs. Sarah complains about the boring activity, even as Tina rattles off pending chores. Steve senses his sister's exasperation and decides to play a game to liven up the atmosphere. The game entails untangling themselves without letting go of each other's hands, which predictably goes sideways quickly. Sarah breaks off the human knot out of pain, prompting Tina to blurt an offhand insult. The two women start bickering as Steve tries to defuse the situation. Tina calls Sarah dramatic, and the latter lashes back that the wedding is ruining their vacation. Tina and Sarah continue to snipe at each other, so Steve opens the door for some fresh air. The mosquito, bloated with zombie blood, flies inside and bites Steve on the neck. He smacks the insect and thinks nothing of it, but the undead mosquito continues to bite him repeatedly. Panicked, Steve twists and spins around the room trying to kill the relentless insect. He ends up kneeling beside Craig and finally hits the insect square on the nose, covering his face in blood. Concerned, Tina ends the party and pushes Steve toward their room while Sarah abandons Craig to clean up the mess. Upstairs, Tina suggests cutting their vacation short. Steve insists on staying, and Tina notices him looking pale and sickly. She seductively caresses his leg and gives him a foot massage, noting that he has cold feet. Steve misinterprets her words and exclaims that he just wants everyone to get along, which softens Tina's feelings about his sister. She promises to try and get along with Sarah while massaging Steve's shoulders. The two exchange sweet words before collapsing on the bed to get intimate. Meanwhile, Penny and Max are still investigating the area, making sure it's clear of zombies. Max makes fun of a seemingly lifeless, overweight zombie as Penny insists on moving where the orb leads them. Suddenly, the zombie awakens, startling them, so Max promptly blasts it with a shotgun. Penny is troubled by the orb's continued humming, and she hurries after Max calling on her so they can get some food. Later that night, Steve experiences a weird dream placing him and the others in a 1950s sitcom. Numerous elements in his surroundings, such as a radio program, the newspaper, and breakfast cereal all revolve around brains. Sarah and Craig enter the kitchen and greet them. After taking a sip of a smoothie, Sarah complains of a brain freeze. Craig and Tina then plug straws into her head to slurp her brain, inviting Steve to join in. The three start chanting brains, leading Steve to also take a sip. Steve then wakes up chewing on Tina's hair, horrified by the dream he just had. The following morning, Steve greets the others in the kitchen as Sarah notes how awful he looks. Steve reasons that a quick morning run might help, and Craig hurries after him, not wanting to be left alone with the feuding women. The two men stop to chat during their jog, when Steve notices he can't find his pulse. The sound of pumping blood dominates his ears, drowning out Craig's rants and instead distracts him to the wildlife around. Steve then hears his friend's heart pumping behind his chest and almost lunges at him, but the smoke from Craig's cigarette makes him back off. Back in the cottage, a starving Steve wolfs down his breakfast and lets out a long, loud belch, grossing out Tina. Sarah voices her concern at Steve not looking too good, which Tina waves off. Seconds later, Steve ejects a stream of liquid breakfast on Tina, covering her entire face and chest. Stunned at what he just did, Steve stumbles out the door and Sarah follows him, trying her hardest not to laugh. Craig dodges cleaning duties and leaves Tina alone at the table. Sarah joins Steve sitting by the lake shore and winds up blaming his sickly state at his upcoming marriage. Steve admits that he's made some compromises in his relationship, only wanting to be content and not hungry for anything. Sarah equates such an outlook to being dead, and asks her brother if he wants anything else in life. Steve claims he's happy with the way things are, and manages to convince Sarah to be nice to Tina for his sake. Elsewhere, Max drives Penny in a truck through a forest road. Penny researches on what else the century-old orb's odd behavior might be telling her. When she mentions it might be indicating a mutation, Max promptly leaves the driver's seat and observes the orb himself. Penny takes over driving duties and theorizes that the orb's weird flickers seem to suggest a virus-resistant hybrid host. Max returns behind the wheel, as Penny notes that the hybrid's resistance to symptoms is exactly what she's been looking for. Max prefers disposing of zombies, but Penny believes that they can use the resistant person's DNA to produce a vaccine. Steve returns to the cottage to find Craig, Sarah, and Tina preparing to go to town. Tina advises him to stay and get some rest. Meanwhile, Penny's orb guides them towards the cottage, where they catch Tina and the others just about to leave. Tina greets Penny and Max, and the older man asks the group if they've seen any zombies, describing typical undead behavior. Sarah and Tina are bewildered, but Craig recognizes Max from an online show, recalling the man's crazed outburst following the host laughing at his claim that zombies exist. Max doesn't appreciate Craig's mocking tone and they start to argue, but Sarah beckons her husband to get in the car. Penny apologizes to Tina for her companion's behavior, but a frustrated Max kicks the orb towards her. Penny catches the buzzing sphere, hands Tina her calling card and a book titled Undead Relations, before chasing after Max in the truck. Tina dismisses the two strangers as oddballs, tosses the card, and gets into their car. Steve, who's been watching from behind the cottage door, goes back inside to reflect on Max's description of an undead creature. A torrent of drool flows from his mouth when he utters the word brains, alarming him. He tries to resist the urge by eating pecan pie from the fridge, but he spits it right back out and concedes that he's now a zombie. Hungry, Steve takes muffins out of the cage and almost bites it, but he overcomes the impulse and kisses the bunny instead. Opening the door, Steve picks up a variety of scents and an idea pops into his head. After arming himself with tools in the garage, Steve ventures out into the forest to hunt wildlife. He fails at capturing even small mammals and resorts to digging up a worm to eat. He spits the creature back out after feeling it wriggling in his mouth. Dejected, Steve returns to the cottage and plops on the couch beside Muffins. He grabs the rabbit and talks to it for a while, but at the mention of brains, he bites the animal's head. Just then, Sarah, Craig, and Tina walk in, appalled at Steve with the lifeless rabbit hanging from his mouth. Later in the kitchen, Tina finds Steve's claim of being a zombie ridiculous. The word brains comes up a few times, triggering Steve's drooling reflex. Tina, thinking Steve is just getting cold feet, pushes to proceed with the wedding despite her fiancé's condition. While unable to explain his resistance to eating people, Steve says as long as he can eat, the wedding can still go as planned. Craig, who's reading Undead Relations, points out that brains are the only form of sustenance for zombies, and Steve drools yet again. Steve suggests he go to a store to get some brains, and Tina volunteers to come with him. Still unconvinced at the zombie claim, she vows to uncover what is truly stressing Steve out. They drive to a meat shop called Cap'n Cletus, Creative Meats, where the group meets and informs the butcher, Cletus, that they're looking for brains. Cletus obliges and presents them with a platter of animal brains, and Steve's eyes widen at the spread. Steve and Cletus sample some of the produce, causing Tina to walk out in disgust while Sarah watches. When Cletus brings out a grizzly bear brain, Steve chows down on the meat, so Sarah buys all of Cletus's stock. Meanwhile, Penny and Max stop to rest at the White Birch campground, discussing their rapidly depleting funds. Arriving back at the cottage, Tina freaks out at Steve snacking on the brains and Craig's grumbling. She announces they're returning to the city, which Craig agrees to, and they get out of the car. In the middle of their bickering, Tina accidentally shuts the car door on Steve's hand, which he doesn't feel at all. Craig tests it out by slamming the door on Steve's body, eliciting laughter from both men. Sarah proposes they go to a hospital, but Steve says it's no big deal, downplaying his condition as just a dietary restriction. To allay Tina's concern, Steve claims he feels great and kisses her passionately. Tina agrees to stay in the cabin, and Steve reassures Sarah, encouraging the group to have fun. Steve spends the rest of the days with the others, enjoying getting impaled by a lawn dart, flipping burgers with his hands, and doing steep dives from a cliff. That night, however, Steve throws up everything he's eaten. Craig points out that it might get worse, citing the book's passage about zombies needing living brain tissue from humans. In denial, Tina maintains Steve will be okay until their wedding. Steve shows up in the kitchen looking awful, but Tina, ignoring Sarah's insistence on going to the hospital, caresses his face. When part of Steve's ear comes off and gets thrown on the table, Sarah puts her foot down. Tina instructs Craig to get her makeup kit, and she proceeds to reattach Steve's ear with eyelash adhesive and a stapler. Steve thanks Tina for being supportive, and she assures him he'll look great at the wedding. Sarah sarcastically comments at Tina's vapid priorities, prompting Tina to have Craig keep Steve's ear in place while she talks to Sarah privately. The two women get into a scuffle, throwing punches and insults in equal measure. As Tina and Sarah hang onto each other's hair, Steve puts them in a double headlock and spouts conflict resolution talking points. Tina eventually proclaims her love for Steve and his welfare, and he lets them go. Having diffused the situation, Steve suggests going to town to hunt for human brains. Tina deems he's in no condition to do such a thing, and comes up with an idea. She and Sarah dress up in provocative outfits, with a plan to entice an unwitting victim for Steve to consume. To mitigate any remorse, Steve pitches that his meal be someone old, unpleasant, or both. The two women then leave for town after bidding Craig to help Steve get ready for his gruesome dinner. At the campground, Penny discovers just how much Max hates zombies, given how the older man would willingly shoot his own hypothetically undead mom. Penny tells him he'll be a hero if they produce a vaccine from the resistant host. Max prepares to leave at once, saying they're off to find bait. Tina drives to a biker tavern, just as Sarah starts to lose her nerve. Tina reminds her they need to do their best for Steve's sake and steel themselves for the task. They encounter a tall, intimidating man who gestures his appreciation for the two ladies. Sarah points this out and Tina goes to approach him. While teaching his friend brain anatomy in the basement, Craig notices Steve sniffing his head hungrily and he storms off. Meanwhile, Tina and Sarah are at a loss on how to abduct the tall man, having failed at sedating him with liquor. Through some clumsy seduction, Sarah manages to get the man into the car's backseat while Tina knocks him out with a stun gun. At the meat shop, Penny and Max learn from Cletus that someone else bought out his stock of brains. Penny recognizes Steve's group from the butcher's description, realizing that the resistant host must be one of them. Tina and Sarah arrive back at the cabin, as Steve screams in shock at their catch. They eventually manage to dump the man down to the basement, and Tina encourages Steve to consume his meal. He appreciates the two women finally working together, and Tina shoves him down the basement stairs. Troubled by his companion's plan, Craig stumbles upon Penny's card and gives the number a call. Penny answers Max's phone and Craig tells them where they're located, asking for help to turn Steve back to normal. In the basement, the pale man struggles to find the right tool or the motivation to carve up his victim's head. Upon arriving at the cabin, Penny tries to dissuade Max from killing Steve and potentially destroying any chance for a cure to the virus. Max disregards this and throws Penny's orb to get her out of the way. Seeing Max's murderous nature, Craig follows Penny. Max breaks into the cabin just as Steve hesitates feeding when the tall man wakes up. The zombie hunter corners a panicked Steve down in the basement and sees the tall man roaring, and the shot rings out. Afterward, Craig sees Max dumping a body into the truck, thinking it was Steve's. Sarah discourages Craig from taking a look at it, while Tina thanks Max profusely. However, Max proceeds to taunt Craig for his supposedly courageous decision. Craig freaks out at Sarah and Tina seemingly fine with Steve's demise, and the two women play along and scream at the hunters to leave. However, Max catches Steve having snuck into the truck trying to crack open the dead man's head. Just as the hunter prepares to shoot the hybrid zombie's head off, Tina and Sarah step in to defend Steve. Penny also begs Max to reconsider, but the older man mocks her endeavor to find a cure, determined to eliminate his adversary. Craig, Tina, and Sarah all jump on Max, but the hunter throws them all off. Steve pins Max to the ground and prepares to eat him, but he resists the urge yet again. He picks up Max's gun and decides that he isn't safe to be around, and they'll be better off without him. Steve rejects Craig and Sarah's pleas and embraces Tina before handing the gun back to Max. The hunter pins Steve to the truck and prepares to shoot him, despite Steve's pleas to not let Tina see him get shot. Max hits Tina with his gun handle, enraging Steve. To everyone's surprise, Penny shoots a hole into the hunter's head. Penny then enlists Steve's help in finding a cure, enticing him with the prospect of fame. Seconds later, Tina shoots Penny through the head. Craig and Sarah scream at her horrific screw-up, but Tina placates herself and Steve with the idea that they're going to be fine, as the hybrid zombie nibbles at the bits of gray matter splattered on his shirt.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.